the September 3, 2020 MPO Planning Tech Committee meeting to order. Can I get approval of the agenda, please? Like a motion and a second for that?
This is David McKay. I'll make that motion.
Jeff May, second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. As we've been doing these last few months, we won't take a vote, so everybody has to unmute and vote. We will just assume that it's approved. Once we have a motion and a second, we'll give an opportunity for anybody that would vote in disapproval and then go from there. So is there anybody that's not okay with approval of the agenda? If not, we'll consider the agenda approved. Guessing from the names we have, we're good enough for roll call. We don't need to go through roll call. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think we can gather it from who's on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. All right, so then next we have approval of the meeting minutes from the August 6, 2020 meeting.
I'll motion approval of the minutes from the August meeting. Huesman.
Tregesser, second.
All right, we have a motion and a second for the minutes. Is there anyone that's wanting to vote against this? If not, we'll consider the minutes approved. Thank you. Next up, we have a presentation from the Integrated Corridor Management. Dylan, are you going to introduce this?
Yes, and I'll actually be doing the presentation here. So thanks everyone. The Iowa DOT and a lot of the jurisdictions in the area have been involved with this project, but we wanted to bring it back. It's been before this committee in the past, but wanted to bring it back and give you an update on where things are. Like I said, I'll be talking about this, but we have, I believe they're on the line, Neil Fobian from the Iowa DOT, as well as John Mark with HDR, who have been working on this project. There might be some other people from the DOT. I don't know if Tammy Nicholson's on, but there's a group of folks that have been working on this for a while. And just to jump into it, just a reminder, integrated corridor management is really looking at the system holistically across multiple modes, across multiple jurisdictions, and everyone working together to just get the most cost-effective, approach out of what we already have. So do more with less. So we're not making big investments where we don't actually need to. We can, take a lot of different approaches and make the system work pretty efficiently. Like I said, this is a collaborative approach. So a lot of jurisdictions, a lot of the folks on the line or on the call today have been involved with this in stakeholder meetings throughout the past couple of years. But it's really involves the DOT is spearheading this, but it involves a lot of the local jurisdictions, the MPO, DART, HRDA, all sorts of different groups are involved. A reminder of the project boundaries, it's for the whole Des Moines metro area and largely follows the interstate system, as well as a lot of the major arterials running through the area as well. So you can see on the map there a lot of the different corridors that are included in this project. And like I said, this project's been going on for the last couple of years. It kicked off almost 2 years ago in October of 2018. And along the way, there have been several meetings, check-ins with stakeholders to determine what the vision is and all that kind of fun stuff. And now we're getting to the point where we're rolling out some of the early programming that will happen, especially on the DOT side, and I'll share that with you in a moment. And starting to look forward of how do we start to work together to implement the ICM and refine some of the larger conceptual elements of the ICM into actual projects. So some of the project types that I'm going to talk about on the next couple of slides that are those early wins for the DOT, and these are projects that are going to be starting to filter into their 5-year program, really fall into one of these 3 categories. So there's peak hour shoulder use, you can see on the left, and this is where a shoulder might be allowed for traffic in certain situations, such as during certain times or certain speeds, low speed conditions. There's also queue warning, which you see in the middle here, where there's dynamic signage that will alert drivers if there's a big slowdown ahead or pretty much a slowdown ahead. And then ramp metering, which folks are probably familiar with, especially if you've been to the Minneapolis area, where there's signals on the on-ramps that allow and kind of regulate traffic getting onto the interstate system. So looking at these early programming for the DOT, on the DOT side on their system, On 235, ramp meters are identified on both eastbound and westbound. So looking at westbound, starting at about 2nd Avenue, moving up to 63rd Street, and then coming the opposite way eastbound from the Systems Interchange at Southeast Mixmaster into about 63rd Street. There's also queue warning programmed or planned for eastbound lanes starting around Euclid Avenue, going north through the Northeast Mixmaster up to 1st Avenue in Ankeny. Looking at I-3580, there's a lot more going on here. So there's a couple of instances of ramp metering around 2nd Avenue on the eastbound and Merle Hay on, on westbound and Merle Hay on the eastbound. There's peak hour shoulder use, basically from 86th Street to the east on both lanes or both directions. And then you have some DOT planned improvements, and those are just normal, construction type projects they'll be doing, I believe. And then queue warning more on the western side in both directions. So from about the Ryder Corner or Urban Loop going west, and then similarly as you're coming east up to that Urban Loop flyover. So like I said, right now, those projects that have been identified, those are making its way through. It's gone through the DOT's management team, and they've signed off on it. It's going to start to go into their 5-year program, and really starting to look at what comes next. So during this fall, and this is one of the first meetings to do so, to begin meeting with various committees, and really to start form ICM committees to work on this moving forward. There's 3 goals here I want to draw your attention to at the bottom of the screen, and this is what the focus will be on going forward. So ICM has big plans to improve safety, and they want to go after some federal funds to implement some projects by the end of 2021. And that could be build, it could be infra type grants and so forth that we're familiar with. But this wants to be a collaborative approach to identify what the right projects are and to apply for those funds. Similarly, want to look at projects on the non-freeway system that can be programmed by a combination of the DOT and local communities, and looking at, how do we get the buy-in, what are the projects going to be, and want to get the partners together to identify what those projects are and to move those forward, possibly for something like an ICAP grant or an SDBG funds sometime. And then finally, preparing the public. So you can see there's a public awareness campaign that begins early spring of 21. So how do we make the case to the public that these are good projects, and then help them understand things such as ramp metering, that they've been proven in other communities, but why are they going to work here? Just a few other things I want to talk about just on the non-interstate system that you can look forward to is traffic signal control and working collaboratively on this. So right now there's an early project underway on the Merle Hay corridor that's an example of this, where the DOT, City of Des Moines, City of Urbandale, and the City of Johnston are working on traffic signal optimization of that corridor. And they want to see more of this moving forward. And so one of these committees that they want to form, or working together with the local jurisdictions, would be how do we go about this in a systematic approach? So developing some sort of process by which these corridors are identified and the strategies that will be in place to move systematically throughout the region and get these done on all the major corridors. Similar to that, looking at not just signals, but infrastructure enhancements along the corridors. So especially on corridors where we have major intersections of 2 primary routes that have a lot of left-hand turn movements, which can bring a lot of delay. What type of things can be done at those intersections that can help move traffic, more efficiently through there? And also, how do we offload some of the traffic maybe on the interstates to these corridors and then, make them work more efficiently? And that could be things like the intersection improvements themselves, as well as access management, and just overall helping resolve some of these bottlenecks we see. And again, looking for committees of locals and jurisdictions, as well as DOT, DART, and so forth, to help identify what the process should be to identify these corridors and make these improvements. Like I said, this is going to be a multimodal effort. So how do we integrate vanpool, carpool, transit, bike share, and so forth into this process? So we have an actual travel demand management process, similar to what we used to have when 235 was going on, where we had a transportation management authority or transportation management agency that could help, make campaigns and so forth to get people to switch from just driving alone to taking some of these other alternative modes. And just one example that can kind of bring some of this stuff together is looking at some technology and tools such as a traveler app. And this was discussed as possibly for funding, going after some federal funding. We held back a little bit this time, but this might be something for the future, where it can help alert drivers to traffic conditions, help them find alternate route, either different routes or different modes to take. But it also would help enable the local jurisdictions, that data would be fed to them too. So they would get some benefit out of that. So I went through that quickly. I want to go back to this, this goal slide and just open it up to any questions or comments that people might have on any of this and the strategy going forward of really working together. Right now, just looking for people that are interested in being engaged with this going forward, I think. And like I said, working together to find those processes to identify which corridors and projects and so forth to move forward for, like it says here, some of these grants by the end of next year and early wins on the non-interstate system. Like I said, there's some folks from the DOT, Neil, and as well as John Mark from HDR. If you have anything you want to add to this that I might have missed or want to clarify that I might have messed up, feel free. And otherwise, if there's any questions from the committee, I'd be happy to take those.
Hey, Dylan.
Yes, Steve.
Hey, Steve Maber. Hey, what? I know we've had some City of Des Moines staff involved, but what was the driver for? Like, what's the problem, or what was the driver? Where did this stem from? Like, what was the driver to do this project?
And that might be a question for Neil or John. You might have a better sense of where this came from.
Yeah, this is Neil Fobian with the DOT location environment. I think what we're really looking at is we're trying to find a way to deliver some of these projects in kind of the most economical way, and it is just not becoming feasible for us to handle some of the increased congestion by building more infrastructure. So we're looking at ways to kind of maximize our system, get the most capacity that we can out of the system right now with the limited resources that we have to work with.
And if you look at the long-range plan,
I just didn't know if there was like a, whoop, sorry.
I was just going to add, and I don't know if this is the case necessarily, but if you look at the long-range plan and a lot of the DOT projects that are planned, there's a lot of money planned if we wanted to expand the interstate system and so forth. So I think this might just be an alternate way to look at how can we still get a lot of those, the same type of traffic movement, but at a lower cost. So the DOT wouldn't have to necessarily invest in that, because if you look at the long-range plan, a lot of those projects have to be illustrative just because there's not enough funds to do a lot of the widenings and so forth. So this is another way to get it, like Neil said, a more cost-effective approach to it.
Okay. Yeah. No. I appreciate definitely appreciate looking at the alternate methods. I'm a fan of that. I just didn't know if there was like a trigger or like I said, where the I-235 is at capacity and we've got to do something now or something. I just didn't know if there was like a political trigger to spend the money to do this. But no, I'm a fan of looking at the alternate measures. So thank you.
And I guess I'd just add to that as well. We're trying to stay kind of ahead of the curve on this one. So we know congestion isn't an extreme yet, but we just want to make sure that we're staying on top of it and trying to head it off before it becomes, a real problem and we have that extreme congestion to deal with.
Dylan, this is John Davis with Des Moines. I guess I have a question for that maybe Neil can address, is that given the financial situation that many of the communities have in terms of infrastructure and loss of revenues, and that this program is looking to engage the locals in partnership, does the department have any, how is the department planning to address kind of, I guess, the programming aspect? Are you looking to maybe revisit some of the packages that were discussed earlier in this effort relative to not only funding, but also the changes in some driver behaviors and travel patterns with more remote telework type of activities?
Yeah, the DOT is looking at some different options, and we're going to be looking at trying to do funding maybe in a way that we typically haven't done in the past. We definitely want to have partnerships with locals on this, and we're currently looking into different funding packages available, and how we can work together with locals to help fund some of these projects. So that's something we're currently working on right now. And
this, oh,
go ahead.
are
Go
you
ahead,
done,
John.
Neil?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, this is John Marth, HDR. Really good question, John. I think the thing to note in kind of the direction of the thing to note in the direction of what we're doing right now with uncertainty and COVID is really the ICM packages are kind of a long-term vision, and we're focused on these couple projects because while COVID has depressed volumes a little bit, and funding, these are likely to be areas that flare back up with congestion over, the next 5 to 10 years, given how they were congested prior to that. So I think Neil kind of handled the financial aspect of the question, but as to the planning and the improvements, we think these have immediate value, if not maybe a little delayed by COVID impacts and uncertainty.
Thank you.
All right, are there any more questions for Dylan or any of the rest of the people? If not, thanks for that report, and we'll move on to the report and vote on fiscal year 21-2024 TIP amendment request. Shriyoshi, are you getting this one?
Yes, thank you. So we have an amendment request from the Iowa DOT. The project in question is a milling and resurfacing of I-35 project in the Ankeny area. The total cost of the project is about $3.9 million and being funded through PRF or primary road funds. There's really no modifications to the project itself. The DOT has requested that the funding be changed from state to federal. So that is essentially the amendment request. Staff is recommending approval of this amendment request, and we are seeking your consideration of this amendment. With that, if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer at this time.
All right, are there any questions for Shriyoshi? If not, looking for a motion and a second on this TIP amendment.
Jeff May, so moved.
John Dostart, second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there anyone opposed to this motion? All right, if not, we'll consider the motion approved. Thank you very much. And next up, we have the report and vote on the Iowa Clean Air Attainment Program pre-applications. Zach, are you taking this one?
Yes. Last month, we discussed the 6 applications or pre-applications, that is, that were submitted for ICAP funding. We sent out a detailed list of each of those applications that provide a little bit more background on each one of them. But a summary of those is included on the screen before you. We had applications from Des Moines, Norwalk, Dart, Altoona, Ankeny, and Grimes. Next slide, please. So the schedule moving forward is we brought these back to you this month for your approval. Once the policy committee approves them on September 21st, we'll forward the resolutions on to the project sponsors. That way they can include them in their final applications that they will submit to the Iowa DOT by October 1st. So as I mentioned, the pre-applications are before you this month for your approval. If you have any questions about it, I'd be happy to address them at this time. Otherwise, staff recommends approval of the ICAP pre-applications.
Jeff May, I have a question. Snyder had sent in a request on, it looks like August 13th for submittal. We're not on the list. Are you familiar with that, or where did that go?
Jeff, I will check that. If you guys submitted it, then we'll have that on the list. The deadline was the 28th, of July, but that's just a rough deadline. So if they submitted late, we'll go ahead and include it, and we'll have that on the exec and the policy agendas for approval.
The email was from Brian Wilhelm with Snyder and Associates, went to DOT, TSIP at Iowa DOT, email on August 13th.
Okay, I will look into that for you and let you know.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
All right, any other questions for Zach? All right, so the motion would be just for what was proposed, and as Zach stated, if there's another one that needs to get added, that'll get added for the exec and policy, correct?
Correct.
All right, so with that, looking for a motion to approve the pre-applications for the ICAP program.
So moved, Paul Moritz.
Do we have a second?
Second, John Davis.
Thanks, John. All right, we have a motion and a second on the ICAP pre-applications. Is there anyone opposed to this motion? If not, we'll consider it approved. Thank you very much. Next up, we have a report on the UPWP project development. Allison.
Thank you. So this fall, the MPO staff will be updating the environmental report. And so we wanted to get some feedback before we did that. Just a reminder, internally, the MPO uses the EJ report for project scoring, as well as focused efforts on the many of our planning initiatives that we have going on. And then externally, we provide this for public consumption and then encourage our member jurisdictions and partner organizations to utilize this as well. Next slide, Dylan. So before you is the 7 degrees of disadvantage that we typically use. So I would be open to any comments or suggestions on how to modify that. And then on the right-hand side are the thresholds that we've typically used. This has jostled around in the last couple of years. Until 2018, we used 6 degrees of the 7 that needed to be over the regional average as the threshold to be considered an EJ area. In 2018, we updated that to 4, so just over half of the degrees of disadvantage. But then committee discussion in 2019 moved that back to 6 degrees. And so in 2020, the MPO staff is actually discussing stratifying these thresholds, and instead of just having an all in or all out threshold, we would have potentially 0 to 3 degrees as of least concern, 4 to 5 degrees of moderate concern, and 6 to 7 degrees of highest concern. So we're bringing this to you so you can give us some feedback before we push through and make a draft to bring back to you in the fall months. So I would take any insight and feedback you have for me at this time. And I'll make notes for our work ahead.
All right, thanks, Allison. Any other questions or comments for Allison? If not, we'll move on to the next report, which is the Purple Heart Highway update. Todd, are you taking this one?
Sure. We did receive the report from HNTB last week. The staff has been going through that and reviewing it. One of the big takeaways, at least just at first blush, is the costs for conversion have been reduced substantially, going from roughly 34 million down to 3.5 million or so. A lot of the design standards from when the report was initially done in 2012 to now have been modified, and not all of them apply, so that's really helpful in our situation. There's still pieces that we need to investigate and a lot of work to be done before that can happen, but good news, at least from that side of things. So we'll keep you updated as it moves forward.
Sorry about that. My phone is ringing in the background, so I left it on pause until it stopped ringing. So next up, we have events. Gunnar.
Good morning, everyone. A few events to make you aware of. The first is a transportation workshop being put on by AARP Livable Communities. As you can see here, the event is coming up on September 15th and 16th, and you have a URL there where you can register. This is one I'm really excited about. We are bringing back our next speaker for the Tomorrow Plan Speaker Series, and James Chung is coming back to Des Moines for a repeat visit. He was here in 2018, if you might recall. He's a data researcher, and he is hired by cities around the country to delve deep into the data to help them suss out competitive advantages and disadvantages and advise them on economic growth. Well, thank you. So at the time, he talked about Des Moines and how it kind of popped out of the data whenever he was comparing other cities around the country. So he's coming back now, of course, amid a global pandemic and civil unrest and all the stuff that's happened. And he's going to get us up to speed on where things stand in Des Moines now and help ask questions about how we proceed from here. So I really expect this one to be a really fantastic one. Hope you guys, if everyone, as many people as possible can make it, register at the Tomorrow Plan Speaker Series website. Last not least, you might consider joining the 21-day equity challenge that the United Way of Central Iowa is putting together. This is self-guided learning starting October 5th. And gives you and your colleagues a chance to learn how inequity and racism affects our lives and our communities. URL is on the screen for you to register. That's it for me, unless you have any questions.
All right, any questions for Gunnar? All right, thanks, Gunnar. Are there any other non-action items of interest for the committee?
I have one.
All right, Zach?
I just want to give you a quick update on the transload facility and the progress that we've made with the environmental assessment and finalizing the grant agreement. So Des Moines Industrial has received their final engineering sign-off from the railroads. The EA was going through a public comment period that completed on July 27th. We had maybe 2 or 3 comments on the EA, nothing substantial. But based on that, the FRA has approved our finding of no significant impact. So that's very good news and means that the environmental process is completed and we can move forward with the project. So we're currently working with the FRA to finalize the grant agreement. It's essentially just awaiting signature by the FRA. We're expecting that to happen sometime in the next week. As far as next steps go, based on this information, the FRA has let us know that the grant agreement will be official as of September 1st, which means that Des Moines Industrial can begin working on their final designs and construction and can start actually using the bill grant funds to reimburse project costs. So just wanted to give you a quick update on that, on the positive progress we're making on the transload facility. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
I'd just like to say, I know it's been a long road to get here. I'm glad that we seem to be getting to this these next steps.
It has been a long road. We're very excited to see it moving forward.
All right, any other non-action items?
I've got one that I'll share, and I apologize for this popping up way too fast, but I wanted to mention something that we've recently become aware of with regards to the census. As you know, the census is being conducted right now and it's wrapping up. One thing that the census is doing differently, the Census Bureau is doing differently is, I can't remember the exact term for it, but they're basically adding noise into the data is what they call it, so that privacy is maintained. However, there's some initial concern coming out of this in that the data is made too fuzzy to where we get some unreasonable results. And this is a presentation from a demographer for the state of Colorado that I have up on the screen. And this is going through some iterations, so this isn't necessarily final, but this was some initial results for how the data is presented and some of the information that's coming out of it. You can see that there's some issues being presented, such as here, household sizes that are less than one, families being identified that have children but no adults, population with no housing units, occupied housing units with no people, just some unreasonable things. And it keeps being reevaluated. However, the most recent one, which was a few months ago, still showed some issues. And again, this is from Colorado. Well, this is from nationally, but presented by Colorado. Where you can see here, there's blocks with children but no adults. A lot of blocks where there's only one gender, and so forth. So this is something that we're looking into, and we'll keep you apprised of. But it might be worth checking into yourself as well, and considering writing letters to congressional delegation, the Census Bureau, and so forth, so that we ensure, because this would have pretty big ramifications for planning, for our travel demand models, for all sorts of things, if the data is not accurate enough to be reliable going forward. So just wanted to bring that to your attention. And like I said, we'll continue working on this and digging into it.
All right, thanks, Dylan. Any other non-action items of interest to the committee? All right, hearing none, our next meeting date is October 1st, 2020 at 9:30. And with that, we'll stand adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Brett. Thanks, everybody.